everyone, and welcome to The Darkest Hour. I'm your host, Amanda Jane. Growing up, I was told, like most people, don't trust strangers, don't ride in cars with people you don't know, scream fire instead of help when you're in trouble, and of course, trust your gut. So you could say I knew better, but I still did dumb things anyway. Luckily, I always got to go home in one piece. A few close calls, but I'm still standing. Sometimes we know what we're doing isn't the safest, but either we have no choice or we think we can handle whatever may come our way. Maybe both. But once we embark on said risk, do we ever really expect the worst thing to happen to us? Tonight, we'll hear a few stories that reinforce that classic advice. Trust your gut, not strangers. So, let's get started, shall we? When I was about 15, 16, I was a real party animal. Always the next town over at my friends' places. Most of the time, I was able to stay at their place overnight and head home the next day. But there were a few occasions where I found myself walking home. This walk was roughly 2 to 3 hours. If it was a nice night, I didn't mind it at all. It gave me a chance to sober up before I got home. No, my parents didn't know that I was doing this. It was just me being a stupid teenager. At the time, there was a good 40-minute stretch that was pitch black, with nothing but fields and forests on either side of the road. It has since been developed into a shopping center and homes. Every now and then, a car would pull over asking if I needed a ride home. Most times I would say no thank you and go on my way with no issue. 2 times cabs had offered me a ride home for a discounted price, and they were both amazing people. They told me about their wives and kids and how I really should be careful walking alone at night. They dropped me at my house, made sure I got in before driving away. One night walking home on that stretch of dark road, minding my own business, a car pulled over in front of me. Not a big deal. This had happened before. As I was about to walk past the passenger side, the window rolled down. A guy in his mid-30s asked if I was all right. He was very clean, handsome, and his car looked brand new. He had a smile on his face and a weirdly friendly tone. Every hair on my body stood up. This seemingly normal guy was giving me one of the worst gut feelings I'd ever gotten in my whole life. I backed up from the car as he spoke to me. Being polite, I told him I was all right and not too far away from home, but thanked him for his concern. The smile never left his face, but it was wrong, like it was being forced. He insisted that he could drive me home, and then he said,
"There are some scary people in this world."
And he laughed. By this point, my body is screaming that I need to get away from this person. I faked a smile, thanking him again, saying goodbye and good night. I started walking away, pulling out my phone, and pretended to call a friend. He sat in that spot for a little while, before slowly creeping up beside me again, still giving me that weird smile.
"Are you sure I can't drive you home?"
I lied, saying I was just on the phone with a friend and he was on his way, keeping my distance from the car.
"You can wait in the car with me,"
he said with a bit of an odd tone in his voice. Yet again, I declined his offer. My skin was crawling, and I'm sure you could hear the nerves in my voice. I continued with my fake phone call, loudly saying, "Oh, you're a few minutes away. Great, you'll see me." The driver's face went completely blank. His smile, gone. Not a single emotion in sight. He just looked forward, rolled up his window, and started driving away. I waited until he was out of sight before running as far away from the road as I could. I made it home safe that night, although the rest of the walk, I was completely on edge, constantly looking over my shoulder and holding my phone up to my ear like I was talking to someone. Obviously, I can't ever really know what his intentions were, but if my gut was anything to go off of, I truly feel like if I got in that car, I would never go home again. Trust your gut and stay safe out there. And please, don't get into the car with strangers. I think I witnessed a cult ritual. So I'm a truck driver, and how my job works is I will drive to a halfway point and meet with another driver, and we'll switch loads and turn back to go home. Well, our meeting point is this parking lot in this ghost town. At least I'm assuming, given everything surrounding it is abandoned, no other points of interest nearby for several miles. I've been doing the same thing every night, Monday through Friday. And sometimes we arrive at the same time. Sometimes he waits for me, and sometimes I wait for him. Well, last night I arrived before him, and I got out to stretch my legs and smoke. This is around 11:40 p.m. Well, while I was standing there, I noticed someone walking up the street. My lights are off, and the parking lot is dark, so there's no way to see me, but thanks to the lights from the highway, I can see him. I don't want to be seen by him, so I toss my cigarette on the ground, and I get into my truck slowly, making as little noise as possible. I climb into the back of my sleeper and close the curtains, but look out the window, and I see an entire group of people, all wearing the same t-shirt, walking slowly, in a line, but stopping for a second every third step. Possibly 20 or so people in the line. I call the other driver to warn him, and I look through a hole in my curtain as they walk by, then out the other window, and I see them just casually walk down the road. Yes, they were just walking down the middle of the road. I didn't get out once, not until the other driver showed up. We swapped and left. This was in Louisiana, about 30 miles from Hammond. My big love bug of a parrot is well trained, and I take him out into the world on his harness. He loves it, and it's really stimulating and enriching for him. He is really cool, so I don't blame people for it necessarily, but he tends to attract a lot of attention. We live in a small tourist town, so it's not just the regulars and locals that I deal with. I never really know what to expect. Most of the time it's harmless, just someone curious about him. I'm pretty socially awkward, and sometimes it's really good for me to talk to the public about him. However, sometimes it puts me in weird, sketchy, uncomfortable situations. It's not uncommon for people to corner me, block my path, or chase me down, yelling things like, "Excuse me."
"Hey, stop. Can you stop? Come back. I want to see the bird."
Please, don't do this. The weird ones almost always ask, "How much is he worth?" Red flag. To which I try to change the subject or say something vague. The extra rude ones always keep pushing.
Yeah, but how much?
Anyway, this one particular day, I had enough of the harassment. I wanted a peaceful day out for us. So I walk with my bird to this quieter end of town. Usually just the odd locals walking by. There's a footpath, a grassy hill, and a beach at the bottom. I'm by myself, so I make sure to have us sit a ways down the grassy hill, in a spot where I can see people coming from both directions. We sit down with our smoothie. My bird immediately dives in and starts ripping up the grass. He's in his happy place. I'm hanging out, playing on my phone, playing with my bird, and watching my surroundings. I'm thinking, all right, this is great. There's been barely anyone. Those that have walked by haven't really noticed us. We're far enough away from the path that for anyone to approach us would be exceptionally awkward. They'd have to walk well off the path and down the hill to get to us. There's maybe going to be the occasional dog person that walks by. Dogs are meant to be on a leash here, but I know that people don't always listen, so I stay vigilant. We've got some shade and are happily sharing our smoothie and playing in the grass. Life is good. Then I notice this man walking along the footpath. He has a schnauzer dog, and it's one of those horrid retractable leashes that no one ever seems to use correctly, but alas. I notice him, then he notices me. Usually dog people are pretty good about keeping a distance. He walks along, sweet. Then the dog notices us. He runs towards us, to the very end of his retractable leash, and is jerked to a halt at the end, barking savagely. I think, okay, he's going to pull him back, to which he does. Phew. I look away for half a second, and then he lets him off the leash. The dog flies towards us. My bird lets out an alarm call and backs up to me as it happens, and I instinctively scoop him up and throw him on my shoulder, standing up and dropping my smoothie in the grass. The dog is leaping at me from uphill, scratching me, all the while barking and acting all savage and inconsolable. Amidst protecting my feathered companion and fighting off this tiny bearded asshole, I manage to utter, "What the fuck? Not cool, get your dog." The man is casually walking towards us, laughing hysterically, with no intention of stopping the chaos. I'm still being attacked by his vicious little dog. Again, I exclaim, "Are you fucking kidding me? Get your dog off of me." This one got his attention.
"What did you just say to me, little girl?"
He says with some accent, maybe German. "I said get your dog the fuck away from us. This isn't funny." He's directly in front of me now. Stops laughing.
"You better watch your mouth. You don't know who you're talking to,"
he says, and proceeds to snatch me by my wrist. Also, please remember, this stupid dog is still savagely jumping on me and trying to get my bird. I haven't ever been physically grabbed like that by a stranger, and I yelled, louder and more ferociously than I probably ever have at another human, screaming to get the fuck off of me, and I jerked my arm back. I miraculously broke free of his grip, and as I did, he geared up to backhand me. He took a swing, and I leapt back, screaming to get away from me.
"You need to take better care of your pet,"
he says.
"You have no idea who you're talking to."
Thankfully, another old man who was walking along the footpath now came out from the corner and saw the commotion. He immediately ran down and intercepted another swinging backhand coming my way and kicked the dog off of me. The evil old German-ish man continues to threaten me and tells me to take better care of my pet, again, while the nice man shoos him away. He finally collects his dog and backs off. He slowly trails away, shouting insults and yanking his dog along. The nice man sits with me for a minute in the grass until we're sure that he's gone. I was shaken up, literally shaking, and he kind of talked me down. It was a stressful walk home, alone. I stopped for no one and was constantly looking over my shoulder. Luckily, it seems that my bird forgot about the whole incident pretty quickly and was back to his cheery little self that evening. I, unfortunately, did not. It still frightens me going anywhere alone now, and it's safe to say, when I do, I'll be putting up with the annoying tourists from now on. When I was in high school, my mother was married to a man named Donald. Now, Donald was a drunk. He worked a good job and made good money, so he provided for us well enough. But he filled his free time chugging vodka like water in his underwear on the couch. Donald wasn't always aggressive when he drank. However, after a hard day at work, he would come home, drink a bottle, and try to pick fights with me for anything that he could think of. Very often these fights would turn physical, and while I was no lightweight in high school, on the first occasion I fought back, he called the cops on me. As a result of this situation, once he was about 3/4 of the way through a bottle, my mother took to packing an overnight bag, having me load up, and going to stay in a hotel for the night. I always stayed in the same hotel, just down the street from my house. It would allow me to go back home before school the next morning, after Donald had left for work, to get ready. It was a nice place, with a huge open foyer that all of the rooms surrounded, going up 5 stories. I knew the ladies at the desk really well, as I was there 5 or 6 times a month. On the occasion in question, I'd gone over fairly late in the evening. The hotel had 24-hour booking at the front desk, but the girl behind the desk mentioned that they were booked up for the night. I breathed an exasperated sigh as I was relayed the news, and mentioned I would just catch a bus a little ways uptown to go to another hotel. The girl behind the desk mentioned that there was one room she could put me in, at a discounted rate no less. She was, however, hesitant to do so. The owner of the hotel had taken it out of service for reasons unknown to her, but that she knew I'd be gone before the owner would arrive in the morning. She could fudge the system to make it look like the room hadn't been occupied. I thanked her for this and accepted, not caring for the other options I had available to me at the time. So I got the key and went into the room, got undressed, showered, and settled into bed. I noted that despite her reservations, the room was immaculate. I simply couldn't fathom why a perfectly good room wasn't being rented out, but decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth. The room was pretty standard as far as hotel rooms go. A single queen-size bed, a TV on the wall to the left, a desk to the right, a mirrored closet across from the bed with a table next to it, and a ceiling fan just past the foot of the bed. I fell asleep sometime around 11 to the sound of the TV playing some late-night cop drama, quite comfortable in the bed. Until around 2:30. I wasn't awoken by a sound as much as a lack of sound. You never realize how jarring silence is until it occurs suddenly in the night. As I rolled to sit up, I took note of the time on the clock, and I noticed that the TV had turned off. The room was illuminated by the light of the parking lot pouring in through the blinds. As my vision sharpened and the room properly came into focus, I noticed that I was not alone. At the foot of the bed was a woman. She was wearing a hotel bathrobe. Her hair was darkened by water, as if she'd just gotten out of the shower. And notably, she was quite tall. The top of her head just 2 feet or below the ceiling fan. She just stood there at the foot of the bed, with her head cocked to one side and stared at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't move. At some point during this exchange, I had convinced myself I was dreaming, that there was no woman in my room. So despite her standing there and staring at me, I wasn't afraid. I had been having hyper-realistic dreams since I was a kid, after all. So I simply laid back down on my back and watched her stand there, my head tilted so I could keep an eye on her, knowing that if I waited, she would simply disappear. And she did. I fell back asleep and slept through to the morning wake-up call. The lady at the front desk sounded a bit nervous when she called, so I quickly got dressed and headed out to the front desk, thinking that her boss may have come in sooner than expected. I wasn't expecting the conversation I had at the front desk as I checked out. When I walked up, she started apologizing to me. I was confused, so I calmed her down and asked her to explain what had her so stressed. She took a breath and said, "I found out why that room was taken out of service." Come to find out, 2 weeks before I stayed in that room, a woman stayed there while on vacation with her husband and 2 kids. She stayed behind while they went to grab breakfast one morning. She took a shower, she put on a bathrobe, and hung herself from the ceiling fan with a bedsheet. Her husband found her when they got back. The room was removed from service as a matter of good taste until the services were held. I didn't know any of this beforehand, and it makes me wonder, did I see her in my room that night? Or was it really just a dream? I'm a 20-year-old female who lives alone. My brother and I used to live together, but he moved out in November, so I'm living alone until the lease is up and can move in with a friend. Well, a couple of days ago, I didn't have class or have to go to work, so I was just chilling on the couch, playing Stardew Valley and watching some YouTube videos. The walls and floors of my apartment are pretty thin, and around noon that day, I hear someone knocking on the apartment door that's below mine. I didn't think much of it yet. Then, about a couple minutes later, someone was knocking pretty loudly on my door. I wasn't expecting company, so I looked through the peephole, and there was a man in a hoodie looking right at the peephole. I don't normally get too scared, but this guy looked frightening, like he was on drugs. I'm 100% sure that he could hear my game and the TV from the hallway, because he did not stop knocking for 10 minutes. And when he did stop, he turned and knocked on both of the doors across from mine, which are vacant units. So I called my complex office, and I quickly asked if he worked for them. They said no. At this point, I'm crying and trying not to have a panic attack. My apartment is very close to a known drug house. I didn't know that until after moving in, so I assumed this man was a drug dealer or something. Then the guy is knocking on my door again, and I'm starting to think that he won't leave and he'll try to break in. So I called the cops. They said they would send an officer by soon. Unfortunately, the guy was gone by the time the cop got there. So the cops just patrolled the parking lot every so often throughout the day. I was so freaked out and I felt so uncomfortable in my apartment that I went to work, and I worked on my day off, just so that I could be away from there for a few hours. I'm a super chill person, an art teacher, a rock garden enthusiast. I love paranormal stuff, but I don't go looking for it or anything. I work with kids, so I'm pretty substance-free and sound of mind. The man who killed his 2 dogs and himself in my house, they're still here. The dogs, too. A German Shepherd and a Malamute. So, backstory. I got the house super cheap because of its history. A very gory previous owner suicide. He'd also attempted to murder somebody during this mental breakdown, but I don't know the details. He was a nice person that had no mental health support and decided to kill his beloved dogs and himself. I thought, how horrible. But man, I needed a place to live ASAP. So I braced myself against superstition or the creeps. The weirdness started immediately, pounding and moaning, like the house was being hit by a bulldozer. Neighbors can hear it from outside sometimes. Huge dogs howling from somewhere inside the house. Bedroom doors opening and closing. Footsteps through the kitchen hallway every night at 4 a.m. It's nerve-wracking, but also sad. More than once I've awakened thinking my house is being broken into. Sometimes I feel somebody sitting on my bed, and more than once I've had my quilt put on top of me. This quilt is in my closet, so it had to be carried out and placed on me. Then I started seeing the dogs, walking across my bedroom carpet and standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. Startling the heck out of me because I don't have a German Shepherd or Malamute. I have a Sheltie with an overbite that can only make noises. My own dog, Kelly Barkson, went crazy, foofing at the ghost dogs. And I ran all over the house making sure it really was spirits. Kelly now sleeps under the covers with me. We see their fluffy tails and watch them disappear into the closet. I don't think that he's a bad spirit, and the dogs are certainly innocent. Often things go missing and I'll ask him or the dogs to help, and the missing things reappear in totally odd locations. Like my lipstick showing up in the freezer, or my headphones under my dresser. Places I'd never leave anything. This is honestly the strangest thing that's ever happened to me, and I still truly cannot wrap my head around it. A couple of months ago, I was home alone while my partner was out running errands. I was taking a shower and I heard the bell that we keep on our door ring and someone say,
Hello?
I had a podcast on, shower running, and the fan. So I said, Honey, is that you? And they said,
Yep.
It sounded like my partner, and so I continued to ask a couple of things, and they responded. When I got out of the shower, my back door was wide open. My dog was pacing around, and my partner wasn't home. I called him and I asked if he had left again, and he was still out. I checked his location, and he was indeed still cleaning my car a town over. I had an entire conversation with a stranger in my home while I was showering, not knowing. Nothing was taken. My dog was not harmed. The police couldn't really figure it out. I don't have a history of auditory hallucinations or disassociation with reality. To this day, I think about it, and I just get chills of what could have happened if there was a different motive. Has this ever happened to anyone, or have you heard of anything like this happening? The fact that I'm fine is great, but it's such a strange thing to do to someone. When I was younger, I used to feel the sensation of a raindrop hitting my head or face while inside. I never connected it to anything, but I always found it so strange, the sensation. Strange yet somewhat insignificant. Like, I couldn't tell you where I was each time, but I know I started paying closer attention to it when I started experiencing it outside my own home. There was a sleepover once, with a couple of girls from my brownie scouts. The girls' house was one where you walked in immediately to a landing. You could go up a flight of stairs to the kitchen, bedrooms, etc. And down a flight of stairs, there was essentially a basement with 2 windows and a back door. That's where we all set up our sleeping bags for the night. There wasn't a working bathroom in the basement, so I remember before everyone went to bed and it got totally dark, I made my way to the bathroom upstairs. As I was making my way through the doorway towards the stairs, I felt 2 raindrops hit me on the head, one on the top and one slightly near my right cheek. I looked up, as I usually do, to see if there was a source for the drops. There was nothing. I touched my head with the tips of my fingers, and though it felt slightly wet, there was no actual moisture on my fingers. I enter the doorway and make my way up the first 2 steps. I'm taking my time because it's darker than I'd like it to be. Right as I get halfway up, there's a cold sensation that runs from the top of my head towards my fingertips. Directly ahead, I see a shadow. It's shaped exactly like a person, somewhat taller than me. Instead of freezing in place as I may have wanted to do, I reached forward towards the light switch on the wall. As soon as I flicked the light, it was gone. No more shadow, no person. So I shimmied up, and on my way back down, I went just as quick. I couldn't bring myself to turn the light off. It wasn't until I was in high school that someone else shared that they experienced the same thing. Not the shadow person, but the raindrops. She was a friend of a friend who we'll call Sarah. It was summertime in Northern California. We were in a new hangout spot, Sarah's neighbor's garage. Not your average garage. It was insulated and furnished. It honestly felt more like a large bonus room, fully equipped with a TV. I didn't drink, but everyone else was, smoking too. I was sitting on the recliner, half listening to 3 different conversations, when suddenly I felt a raindrop hit my head and trickle down. I reached up quickly to feel and see the moisture, but as usual, I saw nothing. From across the room, on the other recliner, I hear an elevated voice. "Hey, you felt that too?" Sarah made her way over to me and basically started asking me how long I've felt them. Did I usually see anything or feel anything else? Our stories were basically the same, except she'd never seen anything like a shadow, but she'd seen things move. Small things like her little brother's toy, and this other thing that's hard to describe, but I knew it instantly when she tried to explain it to me. It's like a wooden skeleton or person-esque doll. No features, and you could move the limbs around. They were bendy and springy in a way. Well, the only way that they could move is if you made them move. But she swore that she'd seen it move on 2 occasions, in the same room, just before she felt 2 raindrops on her head, with no source for the moisture. This was in a classroom at her middle school. We both agreed that we'd felt the drops inside and outside, but had noticed them inside the most because it was, well, uncommon. I have no idea what any of it means, but I've always found it so strange. Sarah told me her grandmother says that it's a kiss from an angel. I don't know how much I believe all of that, but it sounds nice. Has anyone else experienced these phantom raindrops? What do they mean? Well, friends, it appears we've reached the end of tonight's episode, but be sure to join me every single Friday night for a brand new one. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to The Darkest Hour, and tap the notification bell so you never miss a thing. All of these things really help the channel, and I really appreciate it. Also, if you want to support the channel in other ways, check out the description for a link to our Patreon. Like Misanthropia, Rat Girl, or Alicia, you could have your name displayed at the end of every video. Exclusive monthly giveaways, early access to videos, and more. So if that's your thing, check out the link in the description and become a patron today. Do you have stories like these? I'd love to share them. Send them to me, amandadarkesthour@gmail.com. Thank you everyone for sharing your stories and everyone for listening. Stay spooky.